Oliver's fate was sealed by an arranged marriage, forcibly tethered to an alpha with a demeanor as cold as frost. As an omega with a damaged scent gland, starving for appeasement, Oliver suffered through the agonizing torment of heat every single day. In the second month of their marriage, Oliver finally pushed a bubbling glass of orange soda toward Liam. The tips of Oliver's ears flushed red. Liam lowered his eyelashes, his cold gray pupils reflecting the bursting golden bubbles in the glass. His Adam's apple bobbed sharply as the alpha tilted his superior jawline back and downed the liquid in one gulp. In the next second, the alpha's breathing grew suddenly ragged. His elegantly jointed fingers violently tore at the collar of his silk pajamas, an unnatural, feverish flush breaking out across his pale skin. "It's so hot. What did you give me?" Oliver shuddered violently, eyes widening in sheer terror, long eyelashes trembling restlessly. Are you allergic to orange soda?" Oliver frantically lunged forward, so anxious that the corners of his eyes bloomed with a peach, blossom pink. "I'm so sorry. Does it hurt?" Heaven be his witness, Oliver only meant to use the orange soda to drop a hint about desperately needing appeasement. Oliver absolutely never intended to murder his own husband. "Soda?" The alpha's hand froze abruptly on his buttons. Looking at the Omega, who was on the verge of tears, the dark storm surging in Liam's eyes was instantly encased in ice. Liam expressionlessly buttoned his collar to the very top, sealing it tight without a gap. "Ahem. I meant the air conditioning is set too high. It's a bit warm." "Is it?" "I'll go turn it down." Oliver bit his lower lip hard, forcefully pushing back the moisture welling in his eyes. He turned and fled toward the thermostat on the wall as if running for his life, then bolted back to his own bedroom without daring to look back. Midnight, in a lightless room. Oliver curled up under the covers like a fish pulled from water, pale fingertips clawing fiercely at the bedsheets. The heat made Oliver's gland burn and throb with pain. Shedding scalding tears, Oliver sketched out an absurd dramatic scene in his mind. Oliver dying of exhaustion and neglect. Liam kneeling before the bed, clutching Oliver's cold body and sobbing with soul, shattering grief, and Oliver's spirit, hovering high near the ceiling, sneering out the verdict. "This is your karma." A sickly, pale smile pulled at the corners of Oliver's lips, but in the next second, a needle, like sting deep within the gland, made Oliver whimper out loud. In a daze, the light in the bedroom seemed to warp bizarrely. Visible ripples of dark brown pulsed in the air, like rich, melting dark chocolate. It carried a thick, commanding gravity, slowly enveloping and devouring the faint, fragile, and near, shattering warm orange halo that surrounded Oliver. Oliver struggled to lift heavy eyelids, looking toward that dense, dark shadow. The towering alpha was sitting on the edge of the bed. His normally harsh, cold jawline actually carried a trace of softened tension right now. Driven entirely by instinct, Oliver squirmed like a warmth, seeking caterpillar, using hands and feet to burrow right into that broad embrace. It was solid to the touch, radiating a scorching heat. "Do you want me to die a pitiful death?" Oliver buried his burning cheek deep into the crook of Liam's neck, heedlessly wiping tears all over the stiff collar of the alpha's shirt. Oliver babbled on with the delicate grievance of the sick. "You won't give me even a little bit. You always leave me hurting like this. When I die an ugly death, it'll be too late for you to cry." The large hand that had been frozen over Oliver's back suddenly stopped. Liam's hesitant, hoarse voice rumbled from above. "Die of what?" Hearing the alpha actually talk back, Oliver found strength from out of nowhere. Throwing his head back, red, rimmed eyes glaring fiercely, Oliver opened his mouth and viciously bit down on the pulse point at Liam's neck. "You're still making excuses." Tears crashed pat, pat, pat against the alpha's collarbone. Oliver cried so hard he started to hiccup. "I'm a pitiful Omega. My alpha doesn't want to mark me at all. If you're not going to cook, then get out of the kitchen. The stove needs to be used regularly to stay in good shape." This outrageous metaphor seemed to strike dead center, shattering the alpha's line of rational defense. The arms wrapped around Oliver's waist abruptly tightened, nearly crushing him into bone and blood. Liam's blistering breath fanned across the shell of Oliver's ear, sparking a violent shudder. The parched scent gland screamed madly with ultimate desperate desire. "It's my fault." The dark brown shadows instantly expanded, plunging the entire room into an abyss of deep, rich aroma. The highly concentrated appeasement energy felt like tangible velvet, wrapping Oliver up completely, airtight. Liam's voice dropped so low it was almost a rasp, utterly devoid of its usual frost. "Is this okay? Is it too much?" Oliver collapsed into that embrace, completely pliant, bones melting so entirely he couldn't even string together a complete sentence. Like a starving mouse dropped into a rice bin, Oliver greedily swallowed the surrounding dark shadows, yet still felt it wasn't enough. Forcing up the very last drop of strength, Oliver grabbed Liam's collar and pulled himself up. Those wet eyes were filled with blunt, naked craving. "Daunt, you want to bite my gland a little?" 10 minutes later, Oliver shrank back into the freezing covers. His palms gripped 2 glass vials in a death grip, fingertips white, as tears silently broke the dam. And Omega actively begs to be marked, and his husband actually turns around, fetches 2 heavy-duty suppressants from the study, slaps down a cold, unfeeling instruction manual, and walks away. Only that intoxicating chocolate aroma remained in the air, tragically intertwining with the scent of orange spilling from Oliver in the desolate bedroom. How could a person be this utterly heartless? Did his own scent not smell like sweet oranges to others? Did it smell like some foul, rotting miasma, and that's what chased Liam away? To avoid being tortured to death by the heat, Oliver practically pushed the double dose of freezing liquid into his veins. Oliver wasn't born damaged. In his fragmented childhood memories, there were only scenes of wandering aimlessly with his beautiful but destitute Omega father. Whenever malicious alphas approached, nauseating odors would explode in the air. Those cheap, violent pheromone suppressions were like countless venomous needles, completely destroying the fragile scent gland of a developing Oliver. It turned him into a bottomless pit that could never be filled, forever frantically starved for a partner's mark. The final memory was frozen on his father's skeletal hand. That hand, up until the very moment of death, had tried desperately to hold on to Oliver. His shriveled lips moved, constantly repeating, "I'm sorry." But Oliver never harbored a single ounce of resentment. The backdrop of his memories was forever painted with his father's gentle smile and the promise, "Tomorrow, I'll buy my baby some candy." And so, in that twilight, as a life slipped away, Oliver merely squeezed that freezing hand back gently, using every last bit of strength to smile and comfort him. "Tomorrow, I'll buy Dad some candy." The morning light was blinding. Oliver dragged heavy steps toward the dining room, the pink flush at the corners of his eyes still not entirely faded. Unprecedentedly, the alpha, who usually left early and returned late, was actually sitting at the dining table. Oliver forced a pale smile, awkwardly squeezing out a hoarse, ugly good morning. Liam lowered his eyes and took a sip of black coffee. His harsh features betrayed absolutely no emotion, and he didn't even lift his head. "I won't be home for the next few days." Oliver's pupils violently contracted, fingertips biting fiercely into his palms. That thin layer of chocolate scent in the air, the only thing barely keeping Oliver breathing, was instantly sucked away. Oliver bit down hard on his lower lip, swallowing back the desperate, "How am I supposed to survive without you?" And forced a perfectly polite smile. "Take care of yourself." His gaze dead, locked on the alpha's rigid back as he left with his luggage. The pitiful, warm orange glow surrounding Oliver flickered violently twice, before completely dimming into a dead, ashen gray. Inside the sprawling, opulent Taylor family estate, his younger brother, Elijah, leaned against the doorframe, watching his older brother throw luggage into the closet piece by piece, looking entirely exasperated. "You insisted on changing the arranged marriage partner. You've barely been married a few days, and you're already separating?" Liam's movements paused. A heavy, profound loneliness surged in the depths of his cold gray eyes. He looked down, rubbing the wedding band on his ring finger until his knuckles turned white. His voice was dropped incredibly low, like a massive beast terrified of crushing a newborn cub. "It's not a separation. The concentration of my pheromones is too high. I only leaked a tiny bit yesterday, and Oliver became so withered and exhausted. If I forcefully inject it into his gland, it will tear him apart. I'm so much older than him, and my pheromones are too dominating. If Oliver knew, he wouldn't hesitate to throw a divorce agreement at me. I can't risk it." The days Liam was away were a pure physical execution. Oliver was like a desperate puppy, diving headfirst into the alpha's bedding, only to be met with the harsh scent of laundry detergent. Ripping open the closet, he found that Liam hadn't left behind even a single scrap of fabric carrying the scent of chocolate. On a freezing night with howling winds, the humiliation of being called by his father, in name and pressured to produce an heir, coupled with the biting cold wind whipping down his collar as he fed stray cats, became the final straw that crushed this broken body. High fever, stomach cramps, vision entirely blurred by physiological tears. Oliver curled up on the carpet, trembling fingertips dialing a number, finally hitting the emergency call button in sheer, absolute terror. Before his consciousness shattered entirely, Oliver gritted his teeth. I absolutely will not die an ugly death like this. Outside the emergency room, the dead, cold fluorescent lights hit Liam's pale profile. His pheromones went completely berserk, and you actually left him alone? The doctor slammed the report heavily onto the table. He suffered severe trauma from low-grade pheromones as a child. Has a bottomless pit that requires highly concentrated appeasement. Has not afraid of your pheromone. Oliver is starving for you every single second. The alpha's head snapped up, his pupils violently trembling. The divorce agreement he had drafted thousands of times in his mind was instantly pulverized to dust. The suppressed, restrained, dark brown shadows in the air shattered their confines in that very moment. Like a flood breaking a dam, carrying both sheer ecstasy and soul, shattering remorse. The dark aura surged and spread wildly down the corridor, straight toward the hospital room. Beside the hospital bed, the towering alpha's spine was bent over like the most devoted believer. A scalding drop of liquid crashed onto Oliver's pale eyelid, sending a chilling shudder right through him. Oliver struggled to force open his heavy eyelids. In his field of vision, the man whose face was eternally frozen in frost now had bloodshot eyes, trembling as he pressed a kiss to Oliver's forehead. Ah. So I really did die. This had to be the classic out of body karma scene, watching his enemy weep, bitter tears. Without a single second of hesitation, Oliver violently shot up. Opening his mouth, he burst into wailing sobs, his fists raining down erratically against that broad chest. Wow. It's all your fault. Why did I have to die looking so ugly? A calloused, large hand frantically clamped over Oliver's mouth. Don't talk nonsense. You're alive. Liam's voice was so hoarse it sounded like head swallowed gravel. Alive? Oliver blinked, tears hanging from his lashes, completely dazed. In the very next second, Oliver suddenly turned his head and bit down dead hard on the web of the alpha's hand. Sharp canines pierced the skin, and the metallic tang of rust instantly exploded in his mouth. The alpha didn't even twitch an eyebrow, allowing Oliver to tear and bite as if venting out every last drop of grievance. He really was alive. The absolute confidence of a near-death escape instantly inflated him. Oliver violently released his bite, flipped over with a huff, and presented the alpha with a stubbornly unyielding back of his head. Even the incredibly faint, warm orange halo surrounding him puffed out in the air, throwing up defensive, bluffing little spikes. Go away. I'm still mad at you. The brief hospital stay came to an end. Inside the room, the towering alpha had his eyelashes lowered, wrapping an excessively thick cashmere scarf around the young man's pale neck. Those large hands, capable of effortlessly snapping bones, were now clumsily attempting to tie a fluffy bow. It's hot. Oliver scrunched his brow and tried to shrink back. The tiny cluster of warm orange halo, having just recovered a sliver of vitality, flickered in resistance alongside him. But Liam's hand dead, locked around his wrist, and the dark brown shadow descended with undeniable finality. It's not even winter, Oliver argued righteously. Your fever just broke, and the wind is strong outside. The alpha's tone left absolutely no room for debate. Without another word, he took Oliver by the hand and led him out. The heater in the car was on overdrive, and Oliver slept dead to the world against the window. It wasn't until a blast of cold wind jolted him awake that he realized he was once again tightly enveloped in that thick, dark brown shadow, held securely in Liam's arms. Put me down. Oliver angrily kicked at the alpha's shin. The moment the tips of his toes touched the ground, he tilted his delicate chin up haughtily. I haven't forgiven you yet. Keep your hands to yourself. With that, Oliver turned and bolted through the front door like a proud cat, not looking back once. Slam. The cold air and the towering alpha were entirely shut out. The second he was inside, Oliver immediately slipped on a brand, new pair of white fluffy cat, paw slippers, looking incredibly smug. The lock clicked, and Liam's impossibly long legs stepped inside. His cold gray gaze swept over the entryway, finally dead, locking onto those soft, squishy kitten slippers on the young man's feet. An almost imperceptible glimmer of anticipation actually flashed across his harsh brow. "These are mine." Oliver immediately pulled his feet back, jutting his chin out and pointing to the absolute bottom shelf of the shoe cabinet. "Yours are over there." A flash of amusement crossed the alpha's eyes. He pulled open the cabinet. A pair of incredibly crude, rock-hard, cheap plastic slippers lay there silently, entirely devoid of life. Nestled deep in the sofa, Oliver listened to the paused movements at the entryway, the corners of his eyes curving into a sly, mischievous arch. Wanted matching couples slippers? Keep dreaming. The night deepened, accompanied by a comical squeak, squeak sound. Liam, wearing those cheap plastic slippers, pushed open the bedroom door with his own pillow in his arms. Oliver instantly threw up a defensive posture on the bed, arms crossed over his chest, the corners of his eyes pulled up as he shot the man a feigned, ice-cold glare. "What are you doing here?" Liam, like a silent, towering mountain, walked straight to the edge of the bed. Bending his long legs, he actually dropped to one knee. Those eyes, eternally sealed in ice, were incredibly, unbelievably soft. "The doctor said you need high-concentration pheromone appeasement. Can I sleep with you?" The dam of suppressed grievances instantly shattered. Crystal, clear tears crashed onto the back of Oliver's hand without a single warning. "You only came because the doctor told you to. If I hadn't been hospitalized, were you planning on ignoring whether I lived or died for the rest of my life?" The alpha instantly panicked. His large, elegantly jointed hands desperately wanted to scoop Oliver into his arms, yet he hesitated, terrified Oliver wouldn't like it. His two solid arms just hovered stiffly in mid-air, loosely caging Oliver like a helpless marionette. Seeing the alpha looking so comical and clumsy, Oliver sniffled and voluntarily scooted half an inch forward. In that mere half inch, the dark brown shadows instantly cascaded out like a violent tsunami. The rich, warm, dark velvet wrapped the faint, warm orange halo so tightly it was airtight. Liam tightened his arms, pressing Oliver fiercely into his chest. "I was born with a freakishly high energy concentration." The alpha's hoarse voice rumbled from above, accompanied by the gentle, flowing current of the dark brown halo. "Since childhood, as long as I was present, the ambient light around me would warp into a blinding, muddy chocolate storm. It caused physiological dizziness and suffocation in any alpha or omega who came near. I relied on dangerously high doses of suppressants to masquerade as a normal person, but in doing so, I gradually lost all perception of my own energy leakage. I was terrified that my berserk instincts would tear you apart." Oliver narrowed his eyes in pure comfort within that warm, dark brown ocean, though his fingers restlessly poked at the alpha's rock, hard chest. "Then why agree to the arranged marriage with me? At the Miller family banquet, they locked me in a room with Lucas and injected me with an inducer." Liam's facial lines instantly locked into a harsh tension, his gaze turning glacial. 10 seconds after I walked in, Lucas fainted dead away inside my energy storm. I shattered my wine glass. Oliver looked down and grabbed Liam's palm. A devastating, jagged scar stretched straight across it. I gripped the broken glass, vaulted over the balcony, and hid in the shadows of the garden. The alpha wrapped his hand around Oliver's, the cold gray of his pupils reflecting Oliver's stunned face. By then, the energy surrounding me had completely rampaged into a terrifying, toxic black swamp. Even the stray cats were terrified, their fur standing on end as they fled. But you, the scene seemed to flash back to that very night. The young man crouching by the flower bushes wasn't terrified by the violent aura. Instead, tracing the edges of the shadows, his eyes lit up with absolute surprise, as if he had discovered some unparalleled treasure. He murmured softly, "Such a warm scent, just like hot cocoa." In everyone else's eyes, it was the most lethal, suffocating pressure. Liam's Adam's apple bobbed violently. But in your eyes, it was sugar. So afterward, I sought out your father. For this arranged marriage, my one and only condition was you. His heart pounding wildly, Oliver curled his fingers, gently rubbing the scar on the alpha's palm. Pouting his lips slightly, he still wasn't ready to let it go. It still doesn't add up. Since you knew I liked your energy, why did you refuse to fully mark me that night? The moment the word mark dropped, Liam's cold, harsh face visibly flushed crimson. Even the dark brown shadows in the air began to violently boil and churn, exactly like a pot of boiling caramel. I thought. The alpha's gaze actually began to shift, unwilling to meet Oliver's eyes directly. I thought I wouldn't have the right, until you actually liked me. Plus, I forcefully released so much energy that night, and you looked so completely drained the next day. I assumed you couldn't handle the crushing weight of my aura, so the case was officially closed. The main culprit who nearly tortured Oliver to death was actually this man's hopelessly pure, painfully oblivious overthinking. Oliver was utterly exasperated. He opened his mouth and bit down fiercely on the alpha's rock, hard pectoral muscle. With wet moisture still hanging at the corners of his eyes, he glared at him viciously. Who else would be drained but me? I actively beg you, and you drop the suppressants and run away. Am I not allowed to cry the entire night? Liam froze instantly. A blinding light of absolute ecstasy erupted in the depths of his cold gray eyes. The dark brown shadows instantly, entirely swallowed the warm orange glow, frantically intertwining. Liam carefully lowered his head, his very breath carrying a hidden, imperceptible tremor. Then, do you like me now? The air was scorchingly hot. Oliver frantically lowered his thick eyelashes, tightly gripping the alpha's collar. His heart was hammering like a war drum. The tips of his ears flushed so red they were practically dripping blood. Oliver's voice was as thin as a thread, as if it were about to melt right into that dense, dark brown shadow. I don't know what it means to like someone. Because of that hesitant, I don't know, Liam ultimately did not lay down a complete claim. The dark brown energy receded like the tide, transforming into the gentlest velvet, softly cocooning the young man. That hand, capable of wielding absolute power, now stroked down the young man's spine to appease him. The rhythm was slow and incredibly steady, mimicking the exact frequency of his father, coaxing him to sleep from the deepest recesses of his memory. Don't let someone you don't like mark you. Liam murmured into the dark, his voice sounding as if it had been soaked in rich, dark liquor. Even when the young man flushed bright red and secretly tried to guide Liam's fingertips toward the soft, squishy gland at his nape, the alpha merely exercised absolute restraint. He tightened his arms, switched off the lamp, and guarded Oliver as he fell asleep in the quiet dark. But what exactly was it to like someone? The day Oliver was first brought back to the Miller family, he was wearing his dessert shop uniform, having had no time to change, still smelling faintly of flour and cheap butter. He stood awkwardly in the center of that freezing, obscenely luxurious living room. That so-called father looked at him as if assessing an out-of-season piece of merchandise, spitting out words that were as cold as ice, decent looking. He has some value. After that day, there was an endless cycle of exquisite yet suffocating dress, ups, social events, and being scrutinized. Oliver was like an ugly duckling that didn't belong, shrinking back under the mocking gaze of the true young master, Lucas. Lucas had once bragged that Oliver's arranged match would be the top-tier alpha, while Oliver was only fit to be thrown to the old men with twisted fetishes. Oliver had secretly wondered about the Liam he had never met, the man who lived entirely within the highest praises of high society. If I could marry someone like that, would I be able to keep that sweet-smelling dessert shop and just continue being a happy little tailor? Until the day of the engagement, Lucas dragged Oliver to hide behind the heavy, thick mahogany doors, holding his breath to eavesdrop on the conversation inside. When that deep, magnetic, dominating male voice clearly pierced the air, "I only want Oliver," the blood was instantly drained from Lucas' face by some invisible force, leaving him as pale as paper. In that moment, a flicker of light flashed deep in Oliver's eyes, one he didn't even notice himself. But immediately following it was a profound, suffocating panic. So painfully ordinary, with a completely shattered scent gland. Why would that alpha choose me? Is it because I look timid and easy to control? The first faint rays of morning light illuminated the bedroom. Oliver propped himself up, staring intently at the sleeping Liam. The alpha's long eyelashes cast a small shadow beneath his eyes, making him look incredibly gentle. Sensing the weight of the gaze, Liam opened his eyes, the cold gray of his pupils still clouded with the fog of sleep. Ahem, Oliver puffed out his chest, trying to bluff. I am going to open a dessert shop. Actually, Oliver only wanted to say he was going back to his part-time job, but the words slipped out as a deliberate test of the alpha's bottom line. The alpha didn't say a word. He simply reached out with his large hand, like scooping up an errant kitten, and dragged Oliver right back into the warm, dark brown shadow. All right? Liam's voice was hoarse, entirely devoid of hesitation. I'm also going to get a kitten. Oliver blinked repeatedly. You can. Then, I want two. You can. Oliver narrowed his eyes, his fingertips poking the alpha's rigid jawline. Are you just humoring me? Liam was entirely awake now. The dark brown shadow rapidly expanded in the air, carrying an undeniable, absolute sincerity. Anything concerning the household and anything concerning you is entirely yours to decide. You never have to ask my permission. Oliver let out a soft huff, masking the violent, surging emotions within. Flipping out of bed with practiced ease, Oliver began directing the dignified, top-tier alpha to fold the blankets. Watching that towering back bustling about under the sunlight, the warm orange halo surrounding Oliver bounced lightly. Oliver pinched the burning spot over his heart, the unfamiliar pounding rhythm, leaving him increasingly confused. Is this what it means to like someone? 1 month later, thanks to the gentle day-by-day nourishment of the alpha's pheromones, Oliver's originally withered, shattered scent gland miraculously welcomed the regular incoming tide of a heat. Late Saturday night, when Liam pushed open the bedroom door holding his pillow, he was met head-on by a violently boiling, nearly out of control warm orange halo. The corners of the young man's eyes were flushed, a soaked red. Fine, soft hair was drenched in sweat, clinging messily to his blistering cheeks. I don't want suppressants. Oliver, like a dying fish starved of water, stumbled forward and dove headfirst into the dense, dark brown shadow of the alpha's embrace. Trembling fingertips impatiently tore at the collar of his pajamas, exposing large swaths of fragile, pale skin. Okay. No suppressants. Be good, baby. We won't move. The harsh lines of Liam's face were pulled to the absolute breaking point. His thick arms dead locked the young man's restless hands. The dark brown energy storm surrounding them was forcefully suppressed within the master's body, vibrating in the air with a dangerous, humming distortion. But Oliver had vastly underestimated the absolute fragility of an alpha's line of defense when faced with ultimate temptation. As if possessed, Oliver stood on his tiptoes. Parting soft lips, a pink tongue darted out to lightly, teasingly kiss the alpha. Then, looking up at the beast on the precipice of losing all control, with wet, desperate eyes, don't be good. Bite me. Please. Liam's heartbeat was deafening, hammering like a war drum, nearly shattering his rock, hard chest. Why did you ask me if I liked you? Crystal, clear tears crashed heavily onto the alpha's crisp shirt. Oliver clung to that blistering body with both hands and feet, his warm orange halo opening completely, unreservedly to the dark brown shadow. I don't know what it means to like someone. I just want your mark. I want to be entirely enveloped by your scent, every single second. Oliver leaned in. Trembling, feather, light eyelashes brushed against the alpha's deep brow bone. Right above those cold gray pupils, which were currently churning with a terrifying storm, Oliver dropped an incredibly soft, devoted kiss. Is this what it means to like someone? The string of reason snapped completely. The dark brown night instantly crashed down like a violent tsunami, swallowing every last drop of the warm orange light. The entire room erupted into a brilliant, scorching wave of absolute fusion. The next day at noon, sunlight spilled in fragmented pieces across the bedroom. On the soft flesh of Oliver's nape, a deep, purplish, red ring of teeth marks was permanently branded. And that once unparalleled, arrogant top-tier alpha was currently hunched aggrievedly on an incredibly out-of-place tiny wooden stool. He stared guiltily at the patterns on the floorboards, not even daring to lift his eyelashes. Does it hurt anywhere? I'm a little tired, but it feels incredibly good. Dragging a sore but exceptionally fulfilled body, Oliver scrambled and rolled right back into that dark brown shadow, smiling like a cat that had successfully stolen a fish. Oliver greedily rubbed against the crook of the alpha's neck, his voice soft and sweet. Liam, is it winter yet? Yeah, it's winter. The alpha's rigid spine finally relaxed, reaching out with his long arms to lock Oliver securely in his embrace. Actually, in the very back of the shoe cabinet, there are your kitten slippers. But your performance was so terrible back then, I refused to let you wear them. I know. Liam effortlessly scooped Oliver up in a bridal carry and strode toward the entryway, setting Oliver firmly down on the bench. The cat ears were poking out. I saw them immediately. The alpha took off those cheap plastic slippers which had long since been deformed from being stomped on and reeked of harsh rubber, and with absolute treasured reverence, changed into the fluffy white cat, paw slippers. The two pairs of kittens sat side by side, the warm orange and dark brown halos happily intertwined and danced right at their feet. Then why didn't you wear them? Oliver rested his chin in his hands, watching the alpha, who was usually as cold as a demon lord, now acting exactly like a toddler who had finally gotten his favorite toy. My wife was still angry. I didn't dare. Liam dropped to one knee, cupping Oliver's cheeks and dropping a string of sticky, lingering kisses. His cold, harsh eyes were filled with the arrogant pride of getting exactly what he wanted. Not only did Oliver not dodge, he indulgently rubbed right back. In the air, the bright scent of oranges and the rich aroma of dark chocolate merged flawlessly. That, perhaps, was the most direct color of absolute happiness. After the New Year's bell chimed, life was set on a brisk, joyful fast forward. On the corner of the street, a signboard glowing with a warm orange light was hung up, the Little Star Bass. A phone screen lit up. It was a text Liam had sent his brother like a trophy. Your sister-in-law picked the name. It's not changing, no matter who objects. On the other end, the only reply was a helpless, epic. Two tiny fur balls chased each other around the house. The orange cat was named Orange, and the black cat was named Dark Chalk. These names eventually became their respective social media avatars. The ruthless head of the Taylor family sported an adorably soft orange, while Oliver used a block of dark chocolate. Liam defended this with absolute self-righteousness. This is exactly how a married couple should be. Early spring, in the overcast gray cemetery. The towering alpha, dressed in a crisp black suit, made a solemn, lifelong vow before the tombstone of Oliver's father. Upon seeing an old photo of a young Oliver with chubby, pinchable cheeks, this eternally composed, cold man actually reddened at the eyes and shed tears. Oliver didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I was obviously so adorable. What is there to cry about? In their home today, the fruit bowl is forever overflowing with golden oranges, and the nightstand is always stocked with high-purity dark chocolate. The guest room has gathered a thick layer of dust. That pillow that used to be dragged back and forth seemed to have permanently taken root on Oliver's bed. No matter how many times it was pushed away, it seemed to sprout legs and run right back. Late at night, exhaustion washed over them like the tide. The warm orange and dark brown were intimately, inextricably tangled beneath the covers. If you had never bumped into me, would you still like me? Oliver burrowed drowsily into that warm, expansive chest. If you discovered that someone else could accept your scent too, am I really your only one? Every single time, the response Oliver received was a string of fine, treasured kisses from the alpha, trailing all the way from his eyelids to the corners of his lips. Liam's voice was low and impossibly gentle, as if he were guarding Oliver's entire universe. There are no ifs. I love my little orange the most. We were destined to meet, destined to be tangled up for a lifetime. You feel it too, don't you? Oliver was coaxed until his eyes curved into crescents. Tilting his head up, he planted a loud smack right on that rigid jawline. Yeah, I like you the most too. So, what about orange soda? The orange soda you thought I used to poison you. Do you like that the most too? At the mention of that massive misunderstanding, Liam's rock, hard chest vibrated slightly, letting out a rumble of deep, joyous laughter. I like it the most. Oliver burst into a fit of giggles, tangling right along with him. In his memories, his father had always told him that loving someone meant as long as they brought you joy and treated you right. All those little missteps could easily be forgiven. And so, Oliver forgave Liam's initial obliviousness and icy facade, making the choice to love him with absolutely everything he had. The intertwined halos of light and shadow drifted peacefully through the quiet air. The most, Oliver closed his eyes, whispering softly into the dark, I love you the most.
And with that, Liam and Oliver's story comes to a close. It's a romantic fairy tale of mutual salvation, found through clumsy hesitation before finally settling into the cozy warmth of everyday life. They were both like innocent little kittens, clearly yearning for and drawn to each other, yet entirely convinced the other despised them, desperately trying to mask their true feelings. It's honestly both hilarious and deeply moving, simply because they were so incredibly genuine and utterly terrified of hurting one another. Oliver's childhood experiences left him sensitive and deeply insecure, making him terrified to ever voice his own needs. Meanwhile, Liam cherished Oliver so much that he ruthlessly suppressed his own profound feelings. That is, until Liam realized just how desperately Oliver actually needed him. I can only imagine that in that moment, Liam must have felt like he had been blessed by the heavens. And under the warm nourishment of Liam's love, Oliver slowly unfurled his little paws, finally playing freely in the safe haven of love Liam had built just for him. I bet when Oliver finally made the demand to open that dessert shop, Liam was absolutely bubbling over with sheer joy, because that was Oliver's most direct expression of love. It was absolute trust, like a kitten exposing its soft belly, entirely surrendering to your touch. They are truly a match made in heaven. Let's just let Liam and Oliver live out the rest of their days in absolute blissful happiness.